The people aren't happy at all about living out their lives in the desert. They're going to direct their anger against Moses and Aaron. It's Korah's rebellion. Numbers 16, verse 1. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took some men. They rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the congregation, called to the assembly, men of renown. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, comment, 250 princes, leaders, men of renown are rising up against Moses and Aaron. Verse 1, the leaders are Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Korah is from the family that Yahweh chose to carry the ark. Verse 3, the rebels drew a battle line between themselves on one side and Moses and Aaron on the other. It's about 250 versus 2. It's an uneven fight. Why? Because God is on Moses and Aaron's side. This incident is known as Korah's rebellion. The rebels said to Moses and Aaron, going on, "You take too much on yourself, since all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and Yahweh is among them. Why do you lift yourselves up above Yahweh's assembly?" Comment, they accuse Moses and Aaron of lifting themselves up. But Psalm 106:16 comments on this incident and tells us the basic problem. They envied Moses and Aaron. The rebels say all the congregation are holy, every one of them. It's true that Yahweh has said to Israel, quote, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation," end quote. So the rebels even have a verse they can quote, so to speak, but it would certainly be out of context with the rest of the scripture, with the rest of this story, to say that everyone is a priest like Aaron or a prophet like Moses. Verse 4, when Moses heard it, he fell on his face. Comment, in other words, he prayed sincerely. After praying, how did Moses respond to the rebels? Verse 5, he said to Korah and to all his company, "In the morning Yahweh will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near him, even whom he shall choose, he will cause to come near him." Comment, in the morning, Moses says, Yahweh is going to show who are his, who's holy, and who shall come near, that is, who's able to serve as priest. The outcome of this face-off is going to be a little preview or picture of what's going to happen at the end of the age when Jesus appears in power and glory. He's going to show who's holy and who can come near him at that time. He's going to reveal the righteous. Quote, when Christ our life is revealed, then you will also be revealed with him in glory. Colossians 3:4. Also, he's going to reveal the unrighteous. Quote, behold, the Lord came with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all, and to convict all the ungodly of all their works of ungodliness which they have done in an ungodly way, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. End quote. Jude verses 14 and 15. So something similar to that's going to happen tomorrow, but on a smaller scale. Moses keeps talking to the rebels as we go to verse 6. Do this, take censers, Korah and all his company, and put fire in them, and put incense on them before Yahweh tomorrow. It shall be that the man whom Yahweh chooses, he shall be holy. You have gone too far, you sons of Levi. Comment, Moses says, you've gone too far. Literally, it says, the translation would be, it is too much for you, which is exactly the same wording that the rebels leveled at Moses and Aaron in verse 3 when they said, it's too much for you. So we find a case here of what psychologists call projection. The rebels are accusing Moses and Aaron of lifting themselves up, but it's exactly the other way around. It is not too much for Moses and Aaron to minister as they do. It is too much for the rebels to lift themselves up this way. Verse 7, the proof will come when they all burn incense to Yahweh tomorrow morning. We know what happened to Nadab and Abihu when they offered incense to Yahweh that he had not commanded. Leviticus 10:2. Fire came up from before Yahweh and devoured them. Verse 8, Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi. Comment, from this it's apparent that a lot of the rebels are Levites, but verse 1, not all of them. Speaking to the Levites among them, Moses says, verse 9, is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of Yahweh's tabernacle, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you? Do you seek the priesthood also? Comment, Numbers 3:6, Yahweh brought all the men of Levi, quote unquote, near him. But at that time he said, Aaron and his sons shall keep the priesthood, Numbers 3:10. So there is a difference between a Levite and a priest. God called the Levites near, but he didn't call them to the priesthood, most definitely. The priesthood is just for Aaron and his descendants. Moses says, verse 11, Therefore you and all your company have gathered together against Yahweh. What is Aaron that you murmur against him? Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, We won't come up. Comment, verse 1, Dathan and Abiram are in the rebellion with Korah. Those two are insulting Moses by refusing to meet with him. Rather, they sent the following message, verse 13. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? But you must also make yourself a prince over us? Moreover, you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us fields or vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We won't come up. Comment, this statement is so rich with irony that we don't know where to begin. They kept themselves out of the land that flows with milk and honey. And Moses isn't killing them in the wilderness. He's already saved their lives multiple times by intervening as much as he could between them and Yahweh's anger. And rather than putting their eyes out and making them blind, Moses wishes that all of them were seers and prophets, Numbers 11:29. This is what some of God's chosen ministers have to put up with in their congregations. Verse 15, Moses was very angry and said to Yahweh, Don't respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, neither have I hurt one of them. Comment, if Yahweh accepts an offering, he accepts the person who brings it. So if he doesn't respect the rebels' offering, they'll stand condemned. Verse 16, Moses said to Korah, You and all your company go before Yahweh, you and they and Aaron tomorrow. Each man take his censer and put incense on them, and each man bring before Yahweh his censer, 250 censers, you also and Aaron each his censer. Comment, the next verse is the beginning of the next morning, verse 18. They each took his censer and put fire in them and laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Korah assembled all the congregation opposite them to the door of the tent of meeting. Comment, who are all the congregation here who stood opposite them? It was at least all the rebels who answered Moses' challenge, and anyone else who wanted to stand with them. Going on, Yahweh's glory appeared to all the congregation. Comment, just as the appearing of Christ's glory at his return, the appearing of Yahweh's glory in the camp will be good news for the righteous and bad news for the unrighteous. Verse 20. Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. They fell on their faces and said, God, the God of all spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation? Comment, Moses and Aaron are interceding heroically for this congregation that's rebelling against them. They're trying to minimize the damage by saying that one man sinned, that is, one man riled up the rest of them. They're trying to get as many off the hook as they can. They're praying for their enemies. We have to stand in awe of that because we know how sorely these people have tried Moses' nerves. James 5:16 says, quote, The prayer of a righteous man availeth much, end quote. We'll see an example of that coming up because in response to Moses and Aaron's prayer for mercy on the congregation, Yahweh will issue a more limited judgment just on the main perpetrators as we go to verse 23. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the congregation, saying, Get away from around the tent of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses rose up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He spoke to the congregation, saying, Depart, please, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. Comment, verse 25, Dathan and Abiram wouldn't go to Moses, so at Yahweh's command, Moses is going to them. This is the time for any righteous bystander to escape, like Lot escaped Sodom before destruction comes. May we also answer the call to escape our wicked and evil generation. Verse 27, So they went away from the tent of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side. Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. Moses said, Hereby you shall know that Yahweh has sent me to do all these works, for they are not from my own mind. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they experience what all men experience, then Yahweh hasn't sent me. But if Yahweh makes a new thing, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belong to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall understand that these men have despised Yahweh. Comment, Psalm 6:5, Sheol means death. They're going to go down alive into death. Moses told the bystanders to get away from the rebels' tents, and verse 31, as he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split apart. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, all of Korah's men and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol. The earth closed on them, and they perished from among the assembly. Comment, verse 32, that happened to Korah and all his men. Later in Numbers 26:11, we find out that Korah's sons didn't die. We presume either they weren't there or they separated themselves when Moses gave the command. Verse 34, all Israel that were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up. Fire came out from Yahweh and devoured the 250 men who offered the incense. Comment, the earth swallowed 3 families, and the rest of the 250 died by fire proceeding from Yahweh. That's the same way Nadab and Abihu died, Leviticus 10:2, and the complainers on the outskirts of the camp in Numbers 11:1. Fire came out from Yahweh and devoured them. Verse 36, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest, that he take up the censers out of the burning and scatter the fire away from the camp, for they are holy, even the censers of those who sinned against their own lives. Let them be beaten into plates for a covering of the altar, for they offer them before Yahweh. They are holy. They shall be a sign to the children of Israel. Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers which those who were burned had offered, and they beat them out for a covering of the altar, and to be a memorial to the children of Israel, to the end that no stranger who isn't of the offspring of Aaron would come near to burn incense before Yahweh, that he be not as Korah and as his company, as Yahweh spoke to him by Moses. Comment, no stranger shall burn incense, that is, nobody but Aaron and his descendants. Some translations say brazen censers. Brazen means bronze, but it also means rudely bold and unrestrained by a sense of shame. So brazen describes the censers, and it describes the rebels that wielded them, unrestrained by a sense of shame and rudely bold. But unbelievably, the rebellion goes on, verse 41. But on the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, saying, you have killed Yahweh's people. When the congregation was assembled against Moses and against Aaron, they looked toward the tent of meeting. Behold, the cloud covered it, and Yahweh's glory appeared. Moses and Aaron came to the front of the tent of meeting. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. They fell on their faces. Comment, again they fall on their faces in prayer. How many times has Moses spared the congregation from being wiped out by Yahweh's wrath, starting with the incident of the golden calf? We've lost count. Let's not grow tired of praying for our wicked nation and world. God hears. We can minimize the damage. Let's think of all the reasons the people are clueless and bring those reasons before Yahweh. While Moses was praying on his face, he got a word of knowledge from the Lord. Verse 46. Moses said to Aaron, take your censer and put fire from off the altar in it, and lay incense on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation, and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from Yahweh, the plague has begun. Aaron did as Moses said, and ran into the middle of the assembly. The plague had already begun among the people. He put on the incense and made atonement for the people. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stayed. Comment, he stood between the dead and the living, meaning he kept any more of the living from crossing over into death. Verse 49, now those who died by the plague were 14,700, in addition to those who died about the matter of Korah. Aaron returned to Moses to the door of the tent of meeting, and the plague was stopped. Comment, the angel told Lot at Sodom, escape for your life. And that's the simple takeaway message from this. We're surrounded by evil, rebellious people who despise Yahweh, and we can't join them. We have to stand clear of their tents. You might think we have a better excuse than the Israelites because they saw all those miracles and we haven't. But not so. Moses warned them from the earth. The Holy Spirit warns us from heaven. Speaking of the Israelites in the desert under Moses, Hebrews 12:25 says, quote, "See that you don't refuse him who speaks. For if they didn't escape when they refused him who warned on the earth, how much more will we not escape who turn away from him who warns from heaven?" Hebrews 12:25. Hebrews 12:29, quote, "Our God is a consuming fire," end quote. That's the chapter. See you next time for Numbers 17 at landofhavilah.net. Numbers 17.